Hi there, everyone, and welcome to Paper Wishes Weekly Webisodes. I'm Sarah Newman, and I'm excited to bring you this episode of Mixed Media the Paper Wishes Way. Not only is it our 25th episode, it's also our 1-year anniversary, so we're pretty excited. Today, we're going to play with a really fun alcohol lift ink pad from Ranger, and I'll demonstrate how to use it in combination with alcohol inks, as well as heat-resistant acetate and some stamps. Then at the end of our normal webisode, I have a little bonus for you. This is a short extra video where I share some of my top favorite mixed media tools and supplies. There's a special bundle offer on that for you too. As always, I'm really glad that you're here today. We're thrilled that so many of you are joining us on this mixed media journey. So come play with us. Okay, let's start with our alcohol lift ink pad. Now, this is a special ink pad from Ranger, and it's designed to give some really amazing effects with alcohol inks. So the ink pad looks like this. It doesn't have any color on it. It's designed to actually lift alcohol ink off of a non-porous surface, so like this acetate that you see here. You can see the areas behind the butterfly where there is no ink. You can take that using the alcohol lift ink and transfer it onto another surface. So here is my transferred alcohol ink on here. Now it sounds kind of complicated, but the exciting thing is that you can actually stamp with your alcohol inks and you can get two really beautiful looks in one go. Okay, so let's take a look at the process here. I'll move my cards out of the way. First of all, I need to have a non-porous surface to work with. So this can be anything. It can be UPO, it can be glass, it can be plastic. It can also be acetate. So today I'm using hot off the presses heat-resistant acetate as my surface. Okay, so I'm going to bring in a little piece of this that I've cut. Now I've got this onto a piece of white paper just so that you can see it a little bit better. If I wiggle this, you can see the reflection in there. So I've just trimmed this down with my paper trimmer, and I've got this on here. Now I've got my alcohol lift ink on hand. I don't need that right away. What I need to do first is put my alcohol inks onto my acetate surface. So let's start out with any of the colors. I find that the darker colors tend to work well for this. So I have watermelon and I've got indigo here. So all I need to do is just add some alcohol ink right onto my surface. So I've just dropped that on there. Let's come in with the indigo and add some on here too. Now I can leave this as it is, but I always like to blend things around a little bit. I've got a bit of blending solution here on my applicator, and I can just pounce this color around here. So it's going to give me some really beautiful blending between those two colors. Now you can use as many colors as you want to or as few. So it just depends on the look that you like. Okay, now I've got a really beautiful background on here. Now before I move on to the next step, I need to let this dry completely. And it doesn't take very long to dry. But let's go ahead and grab another piece that I've got that is already dry. I'm going to flip this over so we can see this a little bit better. And here you can see a piece that I did earlier. So some different colors on here, but a really beautiful effect. So now what I'm going to do is stamp my image with my alcohol lift ink. So the stamps that I'm working with are the Easy Watercolor Butterflies. So this stamp set has layered images, and this is going to give me some extra dimension. And I'm going to start with my silhouette image here. So this one right up at the top corner. And I have this on my acrylic block. You can also use your MISTI for this if you want to. Now, a couple of other things that I need to have on hand. Of course, I need my ink. I also need to have a dry cloth or tissue, paper towel. That'll do the trick. Don't use a baby wipe for this, even a dried one, because there's generally some oil, some kind of cleansers on there, and you don't want to have that interfering here. So something that is just clean and dry. Now I also have another piece of cardstock on hand. This is just regular smooth cardstock. Okay, so I've got this kind of off to the side a little bit. All right, so I'm going to ink up my stamp. Now, here's a really important thing. Your stamp needs to be clean, because take a look at this totally blank, colorless ink pad. You want to keep it this way. So if you're like me and you don't always clean your stamps perfectly, this time you definitely want to make an exception and make sure that your stamp is very clean, okay? So then I'm just inking up my stamp with the ink pad, and I'm going to stamp this right on here. And you can kind of choose the area where you want to stamp that, where you want to lift the color. Okay, so I'm just gently pressing this on here and lift. Now you can see I've got some ink on here, so right away I'm going to take my piece of cardstock and stamp this down. And take a look. How pretty is this? I have just stamped with alcohol ink, which is not something that you can do by simply applying your alcohol ink to the surface of your stamp, because of course, then it will dry, okay? So now I can come back to my piece of acetate, and you can see that there's something going on here. I've lifted off that ink. So let's take this a step further. I'm going to take my tissue here, and I'm just going to place this on top and rub gently and blot this off. So actually that's a pretty cool image too. So probably hang on to that. I am a crafter after all. And I'm just going to keep doing this until I can lift off any, all of the residue on here. So you can see I've got a lighter impression. I'm always going to be working with a clean area of my tissue or my cloth. And then once I've got most of this off here that I can easily blot off, I can come around and I'm using just my finger in here to remove this ink. And I'm always working from the edge into the open area. So you don't want to take this and do a big swirly motion on there, because you'll just end up sort of moving everything around. Okay, so take a look at this. How beautiful is that? So now I've actually got this piece and I've got my other piece as well. So 2 cards for just one pass, which is a pretty good deal in my book. So now what I can do, if I want to, is add in the layers of the butterfly. So remember, the butterfly has lots of other elements to it, so this would be a really beautiful image to pop on top. So I'm just going to grab this and get my block, get my stamp mounted onto my block, and then I can easily take a black ink pad. Now I've got my black StazOn ready to hand. So let me get this inked up. And I can simply layer this on top. Okay, so I'm just going to press this gently, and there we go. I love it. How beautiful is that? Now, the other thing to keep in mind too, we've got this element here. While I've got my StazOn ink, I can just re-ink this. And of course, because this is a non-porous surface, you definitely want to use a StazOn. And I can come back and again, just stamp on top, like so. Got that a little bit off center, but I think you get the gist. And actually, it doesn't look too bad, even though it is off center. Now, definitely keep in mind, though, you will want to use your StazOn for this part of the process because you're working on that acetate. But take a look. So quick, so easy, absolutely beautiful. And I've got 2 fantastic butterflies that I can put to use on my cards. So now that you've seen how easy this is to do, let's take a look at some card projects. Once again, here are the 2 cards I've made with this technique. Now let's start with our Miss You card. Now this has my acetate butterfly, and for the alcohol inks, I have to say I used quite a few to create this background. I used sailboat blue, amethyst, watermelon, and flamingo. Now as I mentioned before, I find this technique stands out a little bit more when you're using darker colors. I layered the acetate onto a square chipboard piece from hot off the press. It's going to look like this. And to do the gluing, I just use a little bit of regular stick glue. I apply the glue to the chipboard square and then put the acetate on top, rather than putting the glue on the acetate. I just find that it works a little bit better and doesn't show quite as much. And of course, those dark colors here on the acetate will also help to hide any glue showing through. Then I layered the square chipboard onto a scallop square, also made of chipboard. So it gives you a really nice instant card focal. Now you can paint these, you can ink these, you can do lots of different things with them. In this case, I just left them in their natural state and then had that as my card focal. Now the paper you see on here is from the Wood and Textures paper pack. A couple of other things that I want to point out. I added some shading on my card front with a little bit of Prism Thundercloud dye ink, and I also used this little blender tool. Now this little guy is new to me and I've just had so much fun using it. It's a great way to add some shading, really soft color. And so what I'll do is just tap this onto my ink and then kind of work in from the edges into the center of the card. And I think you can see that inking really well down here and up here, so kind of opposite corners. And a couple of other things that I did, I also added some of that glue stick along the edges, kind of top and bottom again here, and pressed on some Wow Fab foil to get this gold foiling effect. Now for my card inside, I have some heavier foiling here and a stamped sentiment. Now this is also on that butterfly set. And I've just put this onto an oval nested die combination. Okay, so for my other card, you can see this is where I stamped off my alcohol ink from this card project. I've got another really simple layout, also using the Wood and Textures paper pack. I also use that blender tool to add some thundercloud along the edges and also around the edges here on this matted piece. And then I just simply added it to the card front. Now here I have a portion of the fancy lattice background cutting die, and that's just been snipped apart and glued on with sticky specks. And I've got a bit more of the gold foiling along the edges here. Now for the card inside, I have a dazzle sentiment, more scallop, oval scallop cutting dies, and another little snippet of that lattice and some more foiling. Now I have one other card set that I want to show you. Now this one has not been finished yet, and I haven't finished it yet because I wanted you to see how beautiful this looks without anything layered on top of it yet. This is using the wood grain stamp. So this is a larger stamp. Here's my stamp that needs to be cleaned. You can see the pattern here a little bit better. So a really beautiful all over wood grain image. And I love using this alcohol lift technique with larger stamps because it means you can create an entire background if you wish, or a smaller element or something that you can cut apart, you can die cut, and so on. Okay, so here I've got this once again put up onto one of the square chipboard elements. And I also used a lot of alcohol inks on this piece of acetate. I used indigo, flamingo, amethyst, and a bit of watermelon. Okay, so I've got a really beautiful and shiny effect. So I've got this onto my card front, which I've covered with the lacy coral paper. And I can use this for pretty much any focal image. So I could put a stamped element or a die cut element, but I have kind of a new addiction, and these are the foiled fancies. Now you can use them as they come, but this one I've altered a little bit. This fern is from the Mystic Garden collection, and I stamped it with the all over script stamp using StazOn, and then sanded on top of it. So I've got a really cool distressed effect. And I've got some foam tape on the back here to give it a little bit more dimension. and a little bit of jute twine glued on here. And I can just pop this down, and that gold ties in so nicely with my gold foiling around the outside edge and my little gold dazzle sentiment on here. Now, of course, we've got the other part of that wood grain stamp, and I've used it here on this card. So you can see I've just trimmed that down, mounted it up onto some different layers, and put it onto the front of my card, which is also using more of the lacy coral patterned paper. Now, the butterfly stamp was stamped in layers, and I used the Prism Camellia Pink and Thundercloud inks for this. So I was able to create a really beautiful coordinating image to go with that alcohol inked background on here. And I've done a bit more of the inking with that blender tool on the edges and then also on this strip of pattern paper here. Now for the card inside, I've got a really simple dazzle greeting and some more of that beautiful pattern paper. So with these cards, I think we can see just how much fun we can have with the Alcohol Lift ink. Thank you so much for joining me today. Now, as usual, we have a Creative Money Saver bundle just for you. And as I mentioned earlier, today we also have a special bonus video. So please do stick around to see my top picks for mixed media supplies.